Good morning, everyone. It is a very early morning. I believe it's about 6 a.m. right now, and I've been here for an hour just getting everything together and set up for this video I have for you today. Today we've got the old 2016 Honda Pioneer 1005. This is the deluxe edition for whatever that matters. This is before the time of four-wheel drive, so if you're wondering why I don't have that, that's why. Today what we've got planned for it is we're going to be putting on some of these Super ATV control arms that are clearanced to help you clear the ruts on the trails, and they're quite a bit more heavy duty. They have full adjustability, they've got grease certs, and they're just built a whole lot better. They're powder coated, they're a nice little product. And in them we'll also be putting in some Super ATV ball joints. You can reuse your factory ball joints if you want to press them out and press them back in. My machine, it's a 2016, but it's only got about 3,500 miles on it. I just don't have a whole lot of time to ride. But I did just get this thing street legal because in the great state of Oklahoma, they just put hands on both cheeks and pushed real hard and pulled their head out of their ass and decided to get along with everybody else and let these things become street legal recently. So you can see she's got her turn signals on. Actually putting on the license plate today. So this thing will start driving a whole lot more. And one of the advantages of these forward offset Super ATV control arms is that you can run a bigger tire. As you can see, and if you might know, the Honda Pioneer does not give you a whole lot of options for bigger tires, because that's one of the first things that everybody likes to do to these machines is throw on a much bigger tire right out of the bat. I don't know why. I'm not going that big. I'm just going to 28 inches. I'm not going to be lifting this thing. It doesn't need to be lifted. It's such a short wheelbase machine. It does not need to sit super high, and you don't need to put more strain on the drivetrain with big old honking tires. But these will allow me to put on the 28-inch Tusk Terrabytes that I'm putting on today. They are a DOT rated tire is the main reason that I'm putting them on. These are the factory 27 by 914s Bighorns that I have on there. They've held up really well for me, except they're a really thin tire and they're really easy to get pinch flats, and they get punctured real easy. But they do great in the mud. I am going to be sacrificing some mud capability with these new Terrabytes, but they'll also sing less on the road, and they'll probably last a lot longer on the road too. We have some on our other ATV that we have that's an ambulance. And it will do a whole lot better on the pavement. So let's get to it. But first, I want to show you why you need these control arms to run a 28-inch tire, at least hopefully. I don't know. We're going to discover together. Super ATV says you need these to run 28s, otherwise you'll rub. I am going to mount the 28s on these tires. I'm going to take off the shock absorber, and that's going to allow me to articulate the suspension here in the air real easy and show you what the clearance is to the fender. So I don't know what it's going to be. We're going to find out together. So let's get to it. So getting those 28 by 10 14s on the 8-inch wide front rim, that was a little difficult because these Tusk Terrabytes, they're a 8-ply radial as opposed to the 4-ply radial that it came with, and that bead's not wanting to seat. I'm going to let it sit for a little bit because it's slowly creeping that way. Had to take it up to the a little bit past the maximum for seating the bead, but it's seated. You know, if you try this at home with pry bars and the stock rims, my hat's off to you. I would definitely go with a lot wider tire. I'm probably exceeding the max specs on these tires, but I think it'll be okay. But that tire is probably not meant to go onto a 7-inch rim, seeing that it's 10 inches wide. I imagine it's probably like 7.5, 8 inches minimum rim width. And in fact, they're an 8-ply radial. I mean, those feel like my ambulance E-rated tires, thickness wise. So I definitely hope I get less punctures and flats now. All right, let's air this thing up about to a 900 PSI, see if we can get it to seat the bead. Alright, last one getting balanced, and does anybody want to guess what it wants for weight? I'm going to go with 1 ounce. It wants 1 ounce. What that tells me is that Tusk balances all their tires with a 1 ounce offset, because every wheel is slightly unbalanced from the factory. Usually the low spots on the valve stem, the high spot on the tires on the valve stem, which I'm guessing that when Honda made these wheels, they didn't plan on you balancing them. Wonder why. So they probably just made them perfectly round and balanced by themselves, and balanced intrinsically, as they say. And so when you put a offset tire onto a non-offset wheel, you get 1 ounce offset on every tire. All right, last one. Let's go see how much clearance we have with these puppies with the stock suspension. All right, so now we're going to take this shock out and we're going to put this tire on. We're going to articulate the suspension and show you how much clearance, or lack thereof, there is. Good Lord. Right there. $17s on both sides for these, by the way. There's your shock out. Now, as I was saying, we can articulate the suspension full travel and show you where you're going to hit. Now, granted, I'm probably going to go further than that shock can go. I'll measure what I go up to because I don't know the collapsed length on those shocks. But we'll show you what you're going to hit with a 28 in the front. All right, let's bring it on up. See if you can see that there. We are really close right there. I mean, not much clearance at all. We're going to turn a little bit that way. Yeah, we hit right there. We're rubbing. Now, I don't know how much compression that is, so let me get it. All right, so let's this out the way. Yeah, let's get a little bit of clearance there. Oh, you did. Oh, okay. All right, so we're gonna turn it to about right there. So far that looks pretty good. Full lock there. Let's keep going up. I honestly don't know if we would have hit. I mean, we have got nothing for clearance, I can tell you that. I can't even get a finger in between there. All right, now, from eye to eye on the shock, we are at 15.5 inches. Fully extended, they're 19.5. Let's go up a bit more. I turn this so I don't hit my jack handle. Right now, the control arms are about parallel with the ground. Not rubbing yet. Like I said, there's literally, I push real hard, I can get my finger in between the inner fender there. And I mean, we are a blonde one from rubbing right there. On the inside, turned this way, there's tons of clearance. That right there looks like the tightest part, which I imagine you could probably secure this plastic piece back a little bit more and gain some clearance. Honda doesn't do a real good job retaining it right there. Some plastic push pins could probably get the job done. Right back here is where we have our tightest clearance. See if I can get you guys an angle on that. You can see that is super snug. So we're going to go up a little bit more. Like I said, the control arms are just a bit below parallel with the ground right now, so we're going to go up a bit more. I don't necessarily know if this would be a problem. Still not rubbing. Like I said, we just start gaining clearance there. But it sure fills up that wheel well, though. I honestly don't think these would rub with the factory tires. Now, also keep this in mind. A lot of manufacturers are kind of loosey-goosey about the size of their tires. They may call it a 28, but it's not a 28. Still not rubbing, and I've gone past parallel now. All right, there's our first rub right there. Yeah, we're rubbing real good. Like I said, it's just on this piece here. If I push that in, we don't rub anymore. So with some plastic push rivets and make it look nice and factory, I'm pretty sure you could just secure that piece back and you wouldn't have to worry about that rub right there. We are past parallel now. Eye to eye on the shock, we would be at 13.5 inches of compressed length. I don't know what those factory shocks go to. Yeah, we're really rubbing now. And at this point, even if you do trim that back, it's going to be snug. And at that point right there, we're also hitting our fender right up here. But man, that's got to be full compression on any shock, whether you're doing the Fox or... Yeah, I'm really lifting the vehicle up. Alright, so at that compression length, we're also rubbing the inner fender there, and there's nothing you can really do about that. It's going to hit that no matter what. So, I don't know. I don't actually think you have to have the Super ATV control arm to run the 28-inch Tusk Terrabyte. Now, granted, like I said, a lot of tire manufacturers are pretty cavalier with their tire size measurements. But I don't think these 28s would rub without doing the forward offset control arms. But, just as a point of note, I think about, like I said, these are about 19.5 uncompressed sitting on the bench here, the 19.5 eye to eye. I would say at least about at 2 inches of compression is probably what's going to happen when it sits down. So we're going to compare this to factory. Get a measurement of it. That's 16 inches. Let's go to 17.5 eye to eye. That's probably about where we're going to sit. That's 16.5. Let's go 17.5. That's 17 right there. So, as you can see, it's about 2 finger widths, a little more right there. And when we go to full lock, I can just get 1 finger in between the tire and the floorboard here. So that's pretty damn snug. With a little bit of suspension flex, you might rub. So if you're on the trail and you do a tight turn and you jam this thing up there, it might hit. Or if you come off a jump or something, and it might be able to hit, I don't know, with a little bit of suspension flex. So we're going to compare that with the SATV control arms installed. I imagine it's going to be quite a bit of a difference. But the big thing is I wanted them now, no matter what, whether I needed them or not, because as you can see here, this bumper I built has a receiver hitch right here, which is super handy for moving trailers around and such. But I put it below my winch just in case I ever had a trailer that I wanted to winch something up onto. I can run this through the front of the trailer and pull it up on. But unfortunately, this thing likes to rub the ground. It definitely decreased my approach angle a little bit by sticking this big old underbite out. So hopefully bringing these tires forward about 1.5 inches will help increase that approach angle and make me rub it on the ground less. So just keep that in mind. With the Tusk Terrabytes 28 inches, I don't necessarily think you have to do the forward offset control arms. So we're going to get this off, we're going to get these control arms out, we're going to get them installed. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to get everything unhooked on the suspension here. So we're going to take out this tie rod. You don't necessarily have to if you're just doing the control arms, but I'm also doing the front wheel bearings while I'm here. We're also going to take off the upper and lower ball joints. You're probably going to require a special tool to do that. Either it's going to be a pickle fork or a separator, one or the other. if you're reusing your ball joint, I really suggest you use a separator, and I'll show you the one that I have, and I'll show the other one with a pickle fork and why I recommend it. If you want to reuse it, get that. These tabs right here that hold the brake line, we're going to have to take those off. We're going to end up taking out the brake caliper. This nut right here is going to end up coming out so we can get everything off of the knuckle to do our wheel bearings. We got some tins here holding the brake line on. We're going to need to get out of the way. We need to get a wrench for that. I'm going to go ahead and get those off now, that way I'm not holding the brake caliper here in a little bit and having to wrestle with those. It just kind of threads through these two little hooks here. So we're just going to set that aside for right now. Get us a needle nose and get that cotter pin out. Cotter pin out. Alright, next we're going to take off our caliper bracket. The caliper will stay on it. Now we already have the shock out of the way from our little demonstration there. By the way, I'm probably going to break that off into another video. I'll keep it on here, of course, but break that off into another video by itself because, one, content. Two, it makes a lot easier resource to figure out what tires will fit without a lift, because that's one of the most popular questions in the community is what tire fits without a lift. Definitely one of the most popular questions. That, and what's the wire with the blue tape for? What does the wrench with a 1 mean? All questions that would be answered by your owner's manual. Hey Steve, will you give me those brake caliper hooks on that hutch too? Yeah. So we're just going to hang this guy up and out of the way for right now, somewhere. There for right now until we can get him threaded through. Now this hub we'll just pull right off. There we go. I'm probably just going to go ahead and take off this caliper guard. Mainly because it'll be easier to film that way. Cutest little, actually I guess it's probably a CV boot guard. Cutest little piece of plastic ever. This guard here, a couple 5mm Allens. I'm going to be taking it over to the press here shortly, so that guy right there. All right, now I remember right because the greaser that I got for this thing actually didn't go over the CV axle. It was too big, or too small. The CV axle is too big. So to grease these wheel bearings last time, what I did was I took off the control arm bolts here, let this whole thing pivot out so I could get the CV axle out of the way to put my greaser in there to grease the bearings. And that's probably what I'm going to do again, because it's really hard to get anything in here to these nuts with the CV axle in the way, and the only way to do that is to slide one or the other out of the way. So I'm just going to start with the top. It's a 14, I believe. You know, before I drop every nut, before I take that control arm off, I'm going to go ahead and separate this tie rod over here. So I'm just going to leave that bolt there for right now. So we've got a cotter pin that we'll pull out. This is one of my favorite separators. It's from a place that doesn't put their name on their tools. I want to say it was like K&K Tools. It's a hydraulic separator. Instead of just turning this guy and using screw force, you get it snug and then you turn this little piston here, which gives you a mechanical advantage at getting this out. So squeeze that guy up in there. Try to get just the tip of the jaw, just the tip, and only for a minute, on the bolt. And once you clamp it down, it'll kind of hold itself, and now I just have to spin that guy. Alright, and we just spin this guy. Pop! Right up out of there. I love this little tool. You can see we don't have any damage to the boot whatsoever. No damage to the threads. It pops right out of there. And it takes almost no effort whatsoever. You just collapse it back down and move on to the next one. Slide this control arm bolt forward. And this whole thing can pivot forward. I can drop my washers. In a very difficult manner, I can get that CV axle out of the way and just let them hang. And just so I have something to hold on to, I'm going to put my bolt back in just so it holds it still for me. So I'm not flopping around, and now I can get these nuts out. So I'll probably bring you around to the front for that. That'll be. Clean these fellers off so we can actually see those cotter nuts, or cotter pins. You know what I mean. '19s. Well, don't you have yourself in a pickle there. Cockroaches want to play rough. There we go. I'm replacing the bearings, by the way. You might want to be kinder to them than I just was. Could just get a swivel in there with an impact, it'd probably come right out, no problem. The top one is a 17, it looks like. Yeah, 17. Hurt yourself on camera, Harrison. It's embarrassing. People are going to laugh at you. I mean, I'd laugh at me. Alright, so I'll show you the separator working on the bottom one, hopefully. I don't know, I've never done that before. down. Alright, so we've got her clamped on there. Take our, so I'll give you a good shot there. How it's clamped onto the ball joint. Now we're just going to crank it on down. And she's loose. I changed my mind. I don't want a pickle fork. I just don't feel like hitting things with a hammer today, but you can grab yourself a pickle fork and this is what I mean by pickle fork. This one's honestly probably too big. These are tiny little ball joints. And you're just gonna jam it right in there. It's gonna destroy your boot. But how hell I'll do it. Fine. Sorry, little ball joint. It's for the people. And she's loose. You can do that. It's kind of violent, as you can see. Yeah, boot's torn right there. So, if you're wanting to, oh wow. Apparently I needed ball joints worse than I thought I did. If you want to do it that way, you can. I don't prefer it. It's violent. Like Gandhi said, there's another way. So there's our top control arm out. Tie rod's loose. We got this loose to replace our wheel bearing, which I'll show in a bit. Probably gonna do a separate video for that too. So now all we have to do is one, rehang our bracket somewhere. Oh, right there, that works. Now all we have to do is take out these two bottom bolts, which both look like 17s, and our bottom control arm is out, and we're halfway there on one side. Mitchell Pro Demand.
Mitchell Pro Demand. Does that have to go?
Nope. Website. Alright. So there we go. That's both control arms out on one side. Now I'm going to do some cleaning up because I'm touched like that, and when it goes back together I want it to look brand new. So I'm going to do some quick cleaning up real quick. Clean up these boots, clean up these parts and these mounts, and then I'll show you how to get the ball joint pressed in to the new control arm. Alright, so I know I said you could probably use a Harbor Freight ball joint press. Mine stopped, and I didn't have any small enough receiving cups. Ironically, the world's largest ball joint press from Matco has the receiving cup, or the pusher and the receiving cup that I need. So we're gonna give her a whirl with this thing. I hope that your experience differs and just a regular old ball joint press will work for you. Get that centered up, because you don't want to know how much that thing costs. What was it, Tyler? It's
over a grand. They're right at a grand. With the attachment.
It was about 1,100 with the press and the
cups.
The cups. I'm not going to use the impact because this thing will... It'll turn a fucking ball joint into a neutron star. And these are tiny little bastards, so I'd like to take it slow and easy.
So your price is...
There she goes.
$34.29. $34.29. Yeah, that now.
It just got hung up there.
So you'll go back to the truck.
Trying to pivot this guy to a little bit better of an angle.
34.29. 32, yeah, $32 for the oil change.
Alright, that feels pretty good right there. Feels like we hit bottom. Pro tip, if you can still move your ball joint after you pressed it in, you probably didn't break it. Tyler came back with some other really big pliers, so I didn't have to go dig around in bull molded cases for my set. Do you promise to cry when you try them on?
Man, I hate doing that.
Sometimes it takes
defies everything.
My colorblind work partner over here is trying on some colorblind glasses for the first time in his life.
Can't tell a goddamn bit of difference.
Takes a little.
That's not very Jake Paul of you. You're supposed to cry. Or Logan Paul. It was Logan Paul, wasn't it? Yeah.
It needs to be bright.
Alright, so I got it set up on the front one here. That fit on that bottom A-frame is tight. You might have been able to do this one with a vise. I'm sure the Harbor Freight or Auto Parts Store one would work just fine for this top one. That bottom one was a very tight fit. Well, Tyler tried the colorblind glasses, and apparently it wasn't magical for him.
Nope.
I was let down just as much as he was.
I was not.
I wanted to see him get emotional.
That's not happening.
Alright, so we just gotta get our snap ring on this one. So we got both control arms in. I just popped them back in. Nothing's tight yet because I'd like to get this to ride height before I tighten anything. That way we don't stress any of the bushings. We got our brake lines back because the SATV control arms come with the threaded holes to put your brake lines back where they were. Alright, so we've got our spindle here. It's completely stripped down. We're going to take this snap ring out. Now, these wheel bearings are not making noise, but I've replaced the backs. And at the time, I didn't have the time to do the front, so I just greased them. But now we're going to go ahead and replace these while we have this all torn apart. And it's going to be the best time to do it. So get your pair of snap ring pliers. You're going to have to wiggle this guy back and forth a bit. Whew. Life flashed before my eyes. Might need to get an edge pried up. Lord, that one's a tight fit. I'm compressing that thing literally ear to ear. That's a stunning one. There we go. And now we can just take this over to the press. This one's going to be kind of interesting to sit it on the press. The backs were kind of interesting if you saw in my last video, but it's going to push out that way. I wonder if I've got a cup big enough that can receive that. I guess we'll have to find that out. Alright, so we got our spindle supported by some arbor plates, and we're going to center it up and slowly go with it. Alright, so we got her washed up. We got a decent amount of size plate to match it to where it's hitting the outside of the race. We're going to press her back in. Trying to center this up below this so it doesn't try to tilt on me. If you've worked a press a lot, you know the sound it makes when it's bottom. If you don't know that sound, go nice and slow, and when things stop moving, you stop too. Alright, so we've got this cleaned up, our snap ring cleaned up. Just got to get this guy back in there. That is a strong snap ring. I'm trying to get one edge in so it doesn't go flying off on me. These are twisting on me. Oh my God. There we go. Whew. Got that guy seated in. I'm going to go ahead and shoot this with some grease with my greaser tool, just because a lot of these bearings just don't come with much grease in them at all. And we can get her put back in there. Alright, so we got some fresh grease on our CV axle here. We got our O-ring back on there. Both ball joints are in. We've got our wheel bearing in. Everything's nice and clean. And make sure you run your caliper through now, otherwise you're going to have to take it all back apart because your caliper won't fit between the gap. So I don't know how it's going to be for you, but for me, I had to take it off the machine, and now I'm pushing down because there's no threaded head or Torx bit or anything like that that can use, and now it's a 22 as opposed to the 19 I think it was on the bottom. But to keep it from spinning on that nylock, I'm having to push down until the taper grabs. So you're going to have to assemble this off vehicle. It's going down. Alright, now we're snug. I can get this part on the other side. Mainly because I wanted to do it myself the first run, just to see what it looked like, so it didn't look like a total buffoon on video. But now that I've done it, I'm basically an expert at it. So you have to pop this clamp off. If you're not using the Rhino axles from Super ATV, you have to do this. We need to pop this clamp off, which is a resilient little bugger. I'm trying to separate that clamp. There we go. That went a lot easier than last time. See, that's a good thing I didn't video that one. There was way too much cussing. So we get that clamp out of there, and we're going to pull this boot back on the steering rack. got a hell of a grab on it. Alright, so there's our rack right there. And the bushing that Super ATV sends looks like this guy right here. They're going to have you just pop that over, and what that does is it limits your steering travel because of the changed geometry of the suspension being pushed forward. Can over travel your steering and bind your axle. So once we do that, now we just take the zip tie that they supply in the kit, or you can go get you another clamp from Honda, I guess, and we just cinch that bad boy down there nice and tight. There we go. Now our steering bushing's in. Guess I'm not going to need control arm bolts yet. Just going to leave that to the side. That rest on the jack, I guess.
Maybe.
Get this nut in for the upper control arm. So it looks like it's a 19. It is a 19. And I bet I'm going to have the same problem that I did over there, which means I'm going to have to push that up in there so it'll bind. Oh boy.
Service, please.
There we go. Alright, I at least got them snug. I'm just going to temporarily install the bolts with the CV axle out of the way just so it holds it for me. I might just do one bolt. And now I can get a torque wrench in here. Bring this guy to the front. I can get a torque wrench in here, hold it somehow, figure that out, and torque these guys down and get the cotter pins in, and then I'll let that control arm swing out again and stab the CV axle in. Alright, so I have a service manual for this machine, and I did the right, proper, responsible thing and forgot it at home. But the kind folks at Shawnee Honda, which have always been good to me, that's actually where I bought this machine at, were kind enough to look up in their service manual and tell me what the torques are. They just told me that the bottom torque for the ball joint is 36 foot-pounds, the upper is 21. That's not a whole lot, but at least it's got a cotter pin. They're working on the tie rod and everything else for me right now, but let's get these torqued down. Like I said, bottom's 36. So we'll get that one done. The new Super ATV one's a 22 millimeter. Alright, so bottom 36. And the upper is going to be 21.
Okay. Yeah, we're just done. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I appreciate it, sir. Thanks, bye.
What did the kind folks at Shawnee Honda say?
For which one?
The control arms and the bracket bolts.
80 on the bracket. The lower control arm is 47, the upper is 36.
You rock. That is not a lot of torque.
Must mean don't take a lot to break that shit.
The four-wheelers are like, what did it say? something. I think's what I saw.
So let's get our cotter pins in
You did
there.
foot pounds, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure.
No, only an inch.
All right, so we did our 36 down low. That felt just fine. I was able to get the cotter pin in, no problem. The 21, on the other hand, wasn't even enough to show the cotter pin hole for me, and it just didn't feel like it was snug. So I tightened it down more, and I had to go way past the bottom torque just to be able to fit my cotter pin in the hole, you know, with the washer and everything. I don't know why they did it that way. I mean, that's a question for someone else.
That's a question you should ask China.
So we're just gonna put in on the old cotter pin. I'll definitely keep it from backing out. All right, spin that bad boy back on around, and we're going to take off this bottom bolt. It's been holding it so kindly for us. Which will allow, hopefully, I might take this shock back out. Now let's move it around a bit. There we go. Now, get our gear back together. Now, I have no advice to offer as far as where to adjust your control arms. It's going to be one of those things that you're going to have to do after you set it down on the ground. I mean, I highly doubt that Super ATV took the time to set those control arms at an optimal position for your model of vehicle, so this is going to have to be something you're going to have to play with. You can take these to get an alignment at any shop. I mean, they align just like any other vehicle. So keep that in mind. Can't be telling crackhead stories while I'm trying to make a video. All right, so we've got our hub loosely fit on there. Our ball joints are torqued. We have not torqued our tie rod yet, and we're going to go ahead and get our caliper back on here. We cleaned our brake rotor. The reason why we're doing that is because that will help us torque our axle nut. We can put something in the rotor to run up against the caliper bracket, and then we can get that torqued. So we got I've wire brushed the bolts for the caliper bracket.
Blue lock tape.
All right. Now we can start torquing stuff down. What's the torque on it?
80.
80 foot-pounds for the caliper bracket. Really? They get 80, but the ball joint's supposed to get 21?
I didn't write them. You're wrong nut. Wrong nut.
Oh, yeah. You know what helps if you go the right direction? Oh, Tyler, you can't say crap. Tell how many times I have to correct Tyler. Hey, you're going the wrong way.
Well, you go tight enough.
I usually wait until a vein pops out of his head. Like, oh, by the way, you're tightening. Push that brake line out of the way a bit. Alright, so now we can use like a screwdriver in the slots of the rotor, and that'll hold it for us while we tighten down our axle nut. Alright, so the torque on our tie rod is 48 foot-pounds. And 8. And it has a cotter pin. You're going to have to replace that one. Don't reuse the one that you took off. Alright. Yeah, so the tie rod gets 48, but the ball joint doesn't. What? Alright, so we got the torque spec from Oklahoma Honda Suzuki this time. Shout out to them too. They're pretty cool. I totally expected them to charge me because every time I go in there they're full of douche canoes, but there's your shout out. You get it. So we're just going to take a screwdriver into one of the slots on the rotor. Maybe. Alright. Torque this down to 101. Alright, got our cotter pin in. Those guys around. Alright. We've got our caliper bracket torqued. We've got, and that's Loctited. We've got our tie rod torqued with a cotter pin in. Upper and lower ball joints are torqued, and our CV axle is torqued. We just now need to torque our lower control arms, and I was thinking that these bushings are kind of like a car where the rubber actually makes all the movement. After looking at it, that is not the case with these, so we can torque these at above ride height, because all it is a sleeve with the bushing that rotates on the sleeve, and when you tighten it down, you're actually tightening down the sleeve, not the rubber bushing. So it'll go long deflection, which makes sense because this thing has like 12 inches of suspension travel, so it might be less than that, somewhere around there. So we're going to go ahead and torque these down. The bottoms are 74.
47.
Or 47. Dyslexia is kicking in. Alright, that's our both lower control arms torqued. Now we just have to do our top one, which is 36 foot-pounds. Thank you for Tyler and his coffee cup notepad. Alright, that's this side done, ladies and gentlemen. You just have to put your wheel on, torque it down to 80 foot-pounds. Let's do that real quick. I haven't done these yet because I want to do the same motion of travel that I showed you at the beginning of this video. So we're going to go ahead and take our shock back out after we place our jack underneath here. See what kind of difference we have with these new control arms as far as the gap goes. God, this vehicle is so freaking light. Oh yeah, huge difference. I can now get a whole hand back here, which we could not do before. I'm gonna rotate this thing all the way over, and oh yeah, I can put my whole palm at full lock all the way up. That right there is bottom, which it'll never go that far. But now we've got tons of room around that tire. All right. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna take a still of this and compare it to earlier, but I can already tell it's a huge difference. And when I look right here, like I was saying earlier, hopefully I can compare a still of this to what we had earlier. My approach angle is much less now, so hopefully I won't be dragging my hitch through when I go through like creeks and stuff like that. All right, guys, I hope you guys like that one. If you did, like, comment, and subscribe to follow us for more, and we'll see you on the next one.